Well, howdy, y'all. It's your boy Johnny Verena. That is my stage name, of course, for music, and I've definitely been on a country ride and a country road these last couple of days. If you cannot hear it, I am recovering from an upper respiratory infection, a URI, not to be confused with a UTI, although both suck very much. Um, yeah, this is the first entry of the year, and I have spent the first couple of days of this year not feeling my best, which is, it is what it is. You know, you can't control it. That's just who I am. I tend to get sick at least about 3 to 4 times a year, minimum. Immune system, all the things inside the body, strange stuff, science, right? What are you gonna do? But it's kind of, in a strange way, it's kind of good to get sick every now and then because, like, it encourages your body to rest, number one, and recover, and to kind of like purge whatever needs to get purged out of your system in order to kind of like come back to a sense of like good health. I won't say like 100% healthy, but it's a little bit better than what it could be. So yeah, like, but I tell you, I was down bad like 2 days ago. Like, had to call out of work a couple times this week, which is really smart because, like, I work in healthcare and I am constantly, literally, this close to people's mouths. The last thing, I know that there's a mask there, but like the last thing I want to do is infect 6 to 8 people. So whenever I'm sick, I'm like, hey, look, I'm like patient zero. You don't need me anywhere near people. So it's good to also advocate like when you need the recovery and rest. Like, I think that so much of like our culture, especially capitalism, is so gung-ho about like pushing through. Just show up and you'll be fine. Like my temp agency even asked me like, do you think that you could be able to work? And I was like, I don't think you understand. Like, I got a virus living inside my chest right now. I don't need to be around people. I don't need to be working with sharp tools. I don't need to be doing none of that stuff. What I need to be doing is resting. And that's what I did. It's my first like walk since I got sick last week or Sunday. And it's nice to kind of like catch my breath a little bit. Get outside, get some sunlight, get some warmth, get some atmospheric healing, because you can get cooped up in a place for a while, and just breathing that same air over and over and over again. This is nice. And it makes me think about like, when illness and sickness occur, how we respond. Like, I know that I'm capable of taking care of myself with my extensive healthcare background and a mom who is a pharmacist. When it comes to like, what do I need? What do I have to require in order to like deal with my symptoms or antibiotics or anything of that nature? Like, I've got a good sense of what it is. I got a good sense of the rhythm and the routine required in order to recover. But that doesn't always mean that like that's what I want to do, Sometimes like we want to be baby and it's okay to be baby sometimes and let somebody or your people take care of you. That is, to me, one of the beautiful things about community, is you being able to lean on others in moments of like distress or crisis or confusion, whatever that thing may be. You're able to like trust somebody, and that was something that I wanted to practice and lean on this time around, is people actively saying like, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? And again, like, I can do it on my own, but always the big question is, why do we have to do it on our own? When we think about like human beings, is constantly, I've talked about how, like, human beings can't do things alone. Like, you can try. We love to create myths about, like, individuality, especially here in America. Like, the American dream is one powerful myth that is constantly telling you that you have to do it on your own, that people are going to be a hindrance, they're going to pull you down, they're going to cause all this misfortune and confusion for you. But in reality, it is people that allow us to, like, pursue some of our biggest and loftiest dreams and goals. And it's learning how to depend on each other that shows real strength, I think. Hold on, we got some people walking up here and it looks cool, but we're gonna let them walk behind and by me because I think they got some doggos. Okay, it's just a parent and child. Let them do what they do. So yeah, like, this sense of dependency on each other, I think it's a thing that is frowned upon so much by us, and yet, like, once again, one of the most essential skills for survival, not only in, like, a basic survival sense, but also, like, in social survival. Like, just really requiring the aid and assistance of other people is so important, you know? I think that it gets overlooked, especially, again, like, when you think about the American myth and how so much of it is driven by individuality. It's not really feasible. Not really feasible. So yeah, I'm reading this really good book called Love in a Up World by Dean Spade. Really, really, really good book right now. And one of the things that the chapter that I was reading talks about is the dominant cultural scripts, is how he describes it. And these are those beliefs, myths, stories that are pervading in culture that seep into so many different aspects of our lives that we oftentimes can't even tell we're, like, acting out on that script, because, again, it's so conditioned and so subtle in its ways. And one of those is the American myth of individuality. Like, why is it important to be an individual in our world? Like, why do we have to be so unique? Why do we have to make ourselves a separate unit from everybody else? Like, what is that driving factor that we want to isolate ourselves from the collective? I think that there is some beauty in it, because sometimes if you're just wrapped up in the collective at all times, like, you probably do think the same. And, like, there is even, like, biological importance of, like, bikers. There's biological importance of, like, genetic diversity. You know, that goes a long way. If you're just constantly replicating amongst yourself, like, you're not adding new variety to your world. So there is some beauty about, like, having some different thoughts that are a little bit separate from the collective. Diversity breeds innovation, right? However, like, what I think that we have in America is not so much diversity, but division. And I think that that is a big difference. Diversity versus division. Like, when I think about diversity, it's the embracing of all the different aspects of somebody's unique identity. It's allowing them to exist as themselves and learning how to, like, live, breathe, adapt, embrace, acknowledge, and accept what they're offering. Whereas when I think about division, that's more about, like, separating ourselves, an us versus them mentality, and not being open, not trusting, telling ourselves that you're an other that can't do a thing for me, and in reality, I should be afraid of you. But that doesn't get us anywhere. That doesn't really, like, promote unity. Again, like, that doesn't promote community, is division. And I think that, like, we're constantly thrown false narratives why we should be divided from each other. people these days are being cast as these characters by media, and we're instilling fear into the hearts of everybody else. Like, that's what's happening. It's division through false narrative. That sense of like, oh, you have to protect your own. You can't trust anybody who doesn't look like you and speak like you and have the same beliefs as you. And it's like, if we keep living like that, like, how does life adapt? How does life grow? How do we evolve? But then you start to realize, oh, that's not what the goal is. Like, society doesn't want these things. They don't want evolution. They want stagnation. They want to keep things status quo, and most importantly, controllable. And that's just a false ideology, like that we can control this world and the things that go along in it. It just doesn't make sense. And yet, every day, we're constantly reminded of why we should, like, do this, why we should be divided. But as I was on my deathbed dealing with the plague, it was people. It was different people reaching out and saying, hey, do you need anything? What would you like? How can I help? What can I offer to aid you? And it was a little bit hard to accept the aid. It was a little bit challenging. Because again, that's that dominant script telling me that I don't need anybody else. I can do this on my own. That is so deeply ingrained that it almost felt like shameful of me in a way to accept an offering that was being offered with genuine care. It wasn't that like I asked somebody and said, hey, can you do this for me? They went out of their way to say, what can I do for you? And even when they offered that, it was still very challenging to be like, oh yeah, like this is what I need, or this is what I would like. So like, it is also like the beginning of 2026, and one of the things that I really want to continue to practice and embody this year is really this kind of sense of a sense of breaking away from the dominant cultural script, which is going to be a multifold process, because one, it requires me to recognize what is a myth or a story that I've constantly been telling myself, that culture's been telling me. And then two, thinking and wondering and imagining and envisioning alternative ways to live that are true to who I am. And that's going to be some work. But I think that is where we need to spend a lot of our mental energy. That's where we need to spend a lot of our time. And I recognize that, like, I'm also taking a major step away from social media at this point, and also music. Like, I'm off of Spotify, and that's like so bizarre in a way, as somebody who's constantly been listening to music for almost a decade now, like streaming religiously. But as beautiful as some of these things are, they can also be distractions from what's really present. And I think I was reading again in the book last night, is like, you have to be open to feeling everything. You have to be able to exist in this reality in order to make change in this reality. And that requires you being present. That requires taking a step back from all the things that might be wonderful on the outside, but can also still be very distracting. And my world's a little bit quieter. It's definitely much more intention based now, and there's discernment that I'm starting to embody, because it's like now looking at myself and asking, okay, now's a good time to listen to music. How am I going to listen to it? What am I going to listen to? As opposed to just mindlessly pressing play and shuffle and letting that just kind of fill the ears. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not judging those who are doing this in their own lives, but for me, it's becoming a nice practice to be a little bit more intentional about what is coming into my world. Because again, I think that like I'm trying to recognize where truth exists in my world, where I want to combat pervading thoughts that are going to be counterproductive to who I am and what I want to achieve. And achievement, even in its own self, is kind of like part of the cultural myth, right? Like success, achievement, goals, dreams, pursuit of all this stuff. Sometimes this is enough. Just being out in nature, taking a breath, talking to myself, and capturing those thoughts. Yeah. How do we change ourselves as a society? It's not really an individual only goal. Ooh, they all landed there. That's cool. Like, it's more than just me saying, like, I'm gonna do this for myself. Like, how can I ensure that my efforts can also inspire and at least offer new perspectives to those who might also be considering it? And that's the difference of like collective versus community, or community versus society. Is like, I want to be able to inspire individuals who are willing to change their lives and their goals and their habits. And a lot of people don't want that. And that's okay. If you don't want to change, that's totally fine. But I want to be surrounded by people who are willing to change. And I want to be surrounded by people who recognize that life is more than individual pursuits. I think that like I'm really drawing on that, like, because once again, like, I could have done this recovery process on my own, but it is through the aid of others that I'm able to like really feel cared for and seen and all the other things that are vital to my healing. That's not just like, you know, the medicine. It's the time, it's care, it's affection, it's being able to engage in conversation and like hear things about people's lives and days. Like, it's a spiritual and also like social kind of healing as well. And you know, I read a book called Way of the Shaman, and I can also attest that I have a very, 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 very limited understanding of like shamanism, and because it is also a very diverse practice all across the world, contingent upon tribes and locations and time periods. But one of the things that the book talked about was this Junose tribe. When it came to healing an individual, the shaman is not a healer by our traditional standards. A shaman heals by creating an environment, a container where a patient can draw power to heal themselves. Now, the shaman may be able to grant bits and power to the healer or the individual who needs healing, but it is not through the shaman's hands that healing is done. It is through the patient that is within the container of the shaman. And I think about that all the time as a healer, as somebody who is steeped in the medical world. It's like, I can do things that can assist in your healing, but ultimately it boils down to a personal choice. And yes, it may be an individual decision to decide when you want to be healed, but healing is done collectively. This whole idea of self-care, self-help, like it's been co-opted by the government and capitalism to once again further our separation. Buy this thing because it's going to help yourself. But sometimes the best form of healing we can have is being in the presence of another. And I think about that. How do the people in our lives create containers for us so that we can draw forth the power in order to restore ourselves? And again, container is very open-ended because I do believe in ethnomedicine as well as like modern medicine, biomedicine in today's times. But once again, think about the container of healing and know that you can't make the container alone.